The gift box felt heavy in my hands, though it was no larger than a loaf of bread, wrapped in silver paper and tied with a navy ribbon. It carried the weight of 3 generations. Inside lay my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one my mother wore on her wedding day, the one I'd promised would be passed down to the next woman who joined our family. I had pictured this moment for months, walking into the bridal suite, smiling through tears, fastening those pearls around my future daughter-in-law's neck. I had pictured her hugging me, maybe even thanking me for helping make her dream day possible. Instead, I stood frozen in a hallway lined with gilded mirrors at Lakeside Manor Resort, my reflection staring back at me like a stranger. The scent of roses and eucalyptus drifted in from the garden, where guests were already arriving, and there she was, Sloane Mercer, standing in her ivory gown, sequins glimmering like ice, her bridesmaids arrayed behind her like an entourage. Her eyes met mine, sharp and unflinching. She stepped into the hallway, closed the door just enough to shut out her bridal party, and lowered her voice to a chilling calm. "You're not invited. Please leave through the staff exit." For a moment, I didn't understand. The words clanged in my ears, disjointed, surreal. My husband Calvin, who had been adjusting his tie just behind me, went rigid. What I whispered, clutching the gift box as if it might anchor me. "This day is about image," she said, her smile thin, practiced for the cameras she loved. "Andre and I have decided. We only want his friends and my family present. No offense, but you don't fit the aesthetic, so please leave quietly." A laugh bubbled up in me, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief, brittle and sharp, behind her. I caught sight of a bridesmaid snapping a photo with her phone, smothering a giggle. Calvin's voice was low, dangerous. "We paid for this wedding. The venue, the flowers, the band our names are on every contract." Sloane's shoulders lifted in a shrug, casual, like she was excusing herself from an awkward dinner conversation. "And we're grateful. But this isn't about you. Don't make a scene. The planner can escort you out a side door." Her words were knives wrapped in silk. I stared at her flawless makeup, the expensive beading across her gown. For one flickering second, I searched for any trace of warmth, any crack in the ice. There was none, only calculation. Calvin reached for my elbow, steadying me. His jaw was locked tight, the way it got when he was holding back a storm. We turned, stepping away from the door, away from the giggles, away from the curated perfection. We walked down the manicured hallway in silence, past portraits of smiling brides who belonged here more than we did, past servers carrying champagne flutes polished to mirror shine. The gift box dug into my palms. Outside, the late afternoon sun turned the lake to gold. Guests in designer dresses drifted toward the garden, chattering about the string quartet warming up under the arbor. I caught sight of Victoria Mercer Sloane's mother waving regally at arriving guests, her pearl bracelet gleaming under the light. She saw us, recognized us, and then turned her face away as if we were no one. My throat burned, but I forced my chin up. We crossed the gravel drive, reached our car, and slid inside. For a long moment, neither of us moved. "She threw us out of our own son's wedding," Calvin said at last, his voice raw. "She threw us away." I whispered. The box sat heavy in my lap, a relic of trust shattered in an instant. I had imagined fastening those pearls around her neck. Now I imagined dropping them into the lake, watching them vanish into the cold, dark water. But Calvin wasn't looking at me. He was staring straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel without turning the key. His silence was louder than any outburst. When he finally spoke, his words were slow, deliberate. "The contracts. Every last one of them is in our name." I turned, stunned. "We don't need to beg for a place at this circus," he said. "And if they want us invisible, then everything we gave them can disappear too. Flowers, food, music, all of it." I looked down at the gift box again. My whole life, I had been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed ruffled feathers, who swallowed hurt for the sake of family harmony. But in that moment, I felt something shift deep inside me. The string quartet's notes floated faintly through the air, sweet and hollow. Guests were laughing, clinking glasses, waiting for a wedding that was already unraveling. I closed my eyes, inhaled the scent of roses on the wind, and nodded. Do it. Calvin pulled out his phone, his fingers, steady now. Scrolled through the list of vendors, the planner, the florist, the band leader. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, measured, almost gentle. This is Calvin Brooks. I'm the signatory on the contract. We're canceling effective immediately. I sat beside him, cold coffee from the cafe across the street waiting in my memory, listening to his words carry the quiet vengeance of a lifetime of restraint. The strings played, the guests laughed, and with every call, every calm cancellation, their perfect day cracked a little more. I opened my phone. The florist, the decorator, the caterer, each one picked up, each one listened, each one paused, then agreed. Our names were on the dotted line. Our authority was absolute. By the time we put our phones down, the sun was lowering over the lake, bleeding orange into gray, inside that resort. A bride prepared to walk down an aisle lined with flowers we had just withdrawn, toward music we had just silenced, to a feast we had just erased. My hands no longer trembled. I placed the gift box gently on the dashboard and whispered. More to myself than anyone else, she wanted us gone. Let's see how her day looks without us. And in the quiet that followed, one question echoed like a drumbeat in my mind, a question that would haunt every breath until the truth was uncovered. What kind of woman tells her husband's parents they are not invited to the wedding they paid for, and why was she so certain she could get away with it? The morning after the wedding that never was, I stood at the kitchen window, watching the lights spill across the quiet street. Our neighborhood in suburban Georgia was the kind where people waved from their driveways, where the air on Sunday mornings smelled of bacon and biscuits, where life felt safe and steady. For nearly 30 years, this house had been our sanctuary. It was where we raised Andre, where Calvin grilled ribs every Memorial Day, where the church ladies gathered after choir practice and filled the living room with laughter. Every picture frame on the walls whispered of years invested, of love that felt certain, of sacrifices that we thought had meaning. And yet, in less than 24 hours, our place in our own son's life had been rewritten, not with words of gratitude or respect, but with 4 small syllables. Not invited. Calvin came in from the porch, still in his robe, the morning paper folded under his arm. He poured his coffee in silence, the way he did when something was eating at him. His calmness had always been my anchor, but I saw the tightness in his shoulders, the storm he carried just beneath the surface. Andre was our only child, our miracle boy. After years of prayers whispered into hospital corridors, he came to us, and we devoted everything to him. We worked extra shifts, clipped coupons, skipped vacations. We wanted him to stand on a foundation stronger than the one we had inherited. And he had. By 28, Andre was a software engineer, leading a small team at a startup in Atlanta. He was bright, kind, but also soft-hearted to a fault. Always the peacemaker, always bending himself to fit what others wanted. A piece of me feared that gentleness would one day be his undoing. It wasn't until 3 years ago that he brought home Sloan Mercer. She arrived at our doorstep in designer heels, her hair swept into a glossy knot, her smile practiced like she was stepping onto a stage. "It's so good to finally meet you," she had said, voice warm but eyes already scanning our living room like she was evaluating a set. Sloan wasn't just any young woman. She was an influencer her brand built on curated images of luxury brunches at rooftop restaurants, vacations in Santorini, champagne poured in slow motion for an audience of thousands. At our family cookout, she wrinkled her nose at red plastic cups. At Christmas, she suggested Andre wear designer suits for photos. It wasn't about love, it was about image. Then came Victoria Mercer Sloan's mother. If Sloan was ice, Victoria was steel. A woman who believed life was a ladder to be climbed, every rung greased with appearances and alliances. She spoke of country clubs, networking, and curating connections the way our church sisters spoke of recipes. I will never forget the first time she visited our home. She walked through our modest kitchen, glanced at my mason jars filled with sugar and flour, and smiled politely. "Charming," she said, the way one might comment on a child's art project pinned to the fridge. It was clear from the start in her eyes. We weren't the right fit for her world. But Andre loved Sloan. He swore she understood him. That, behind the cameras and the branding, there was a softer woman who wanted to build a life with him. He asked us to trust him, to welcome her. And so we did what parents do. We sacrificed. When the engagement came, the Mercers suggested a wedding at Lakeside Manor, a resort venue with marble fountains and manicured gardens. The price tag made my breath catch, but Andre looked at us with hope in his eyes, and Calvin said, "We'll make it happen." We dipped into our savings, even touched the home equity line we had promised to leave untouched. Venue $35,000, catering $18,000. Photographer, band, florist, planner, every contract carried our names. We told ourselves it was worth it. Our son deserved the day of his dreams. Still, there were warning signs. The rehearsal dinner we weren't asked to speak, streamlined program, Sloan had said. The bridal shower. Not a single invite sent our way. When I asked about the wedding colors, Sloan replied, "It's not really your lane." Nia. Even Andre grew quieter, deflecting our questions, insisting everything was fine. He looked tired sometimes, caught between two worlds ours, built on faith and sweat, and hers, built on filters and contracts. I should have pressed harder. I should have asked why the planner suddenly requested final payments routed through a different account. Why Aunt Jo whispered that the new contract she saw listed Mercer Media LLC as host instead of us. Why our names were slowly disappearing from the paperwork we had signed. But I didn't. I smoothed it over. I told myself families blend differently. I told myself love would find its way. Until yesterday, when Sloan herself made it plain. Now, standing in my kitchen with the sunlight catching on that untouched gift box, I felt the weight of every compromise, every silence I had swallowed. The phone buzzed on the counter. A message from B, my next-door neighbor and closest confidant. She had been at the wedding as a guest of Aunt Jo. "Call me when you can. You won't believe what I heard after you left." I stared at the screen, heart thudding. I didn't know it yet, but that message was the first stone in a landslide that would uncover secrets deeper than an uninvitation. Secrets about contracts, money, and a marriage built not on love, but on leverage. I picked up the phone, pressed call, and braced myself. Because if Sloan's words yesterday had shattered me, what B was about to reveal would set the entire foundation of our lives trembling. B's voice crackled through the line, low and urgent. "Naya, you need to know what was being said after y'all left. The bridesmaids were laughing about how the Brookses finally got the hint. Someone even joked. At least now the photos will look clean. Clean. Like you and Calvin were dirt to be brushed off a perfect picture." I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles ached. "Clean," I repeated. "That's not all." B continued. "I overheard Sloan's planner. That girl Tessa, arguing with the florist on the patio. Something about final payments." The florist looked confused and said, "But Mrs. Brooks hasn't authorized this." Tessa snapped back. "Forget the Brooks. It's Mercer Media signing off now." Mercer Media. The words landed like a stone in my stomach. After we hung up, I turned to Calvin, who was watching me with that steady gaze of his. He didn't need to ask. He already knew something was rotten. "They've been cutting us out for weeks," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Paperwork doesn't lie. If they changed contracts behind our backs, we'll find it over the next few days." The signs multiplied. At the bakery, a florist I knew quietly mentioned that the planner had rerouted payments to a new account, Mercer Media LLC. Her voice dropped when she said, It's like they wanted you erased from the books. Their pitying eyes burned hotter than shame. It wasn't just our daughter-in-law's rejection now. It was the story she was spinning about us that night. Andre finally came by the house. He sat stiffly at our kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. "I know you're upset," he began carefully. "But Sloan just wants things to be professional. She's building a brand. She can't risk messy family drama going public." "Messy," I said, my voice trembling. "Is that what she calls us?" Mess Andre winced. "She didn't mean it like that. Look, Mom, Dad, she just wants her day to look a certain way. The sponsors." Calvin cut him off, his voice clipped. "Sponsors? What does a wedding need sponsors for?" Andre's eyes darted away. He muttered something about brand partnerships and exclusive content rights, but his words twisted into knots. He looked like a man cornered, repeating words that weren't his. I could almost hear Victoria's voice behind every excuse. "Son," Calvin said softly. "Did you sign anything?" Andre hesitated too long. The next morning, a thick envelope slid under our front door. No return address. Inside was a printed screenshot from a private Instagram story. The caption read, "An old money wedding. No messy in-laws. Just pure Mercer aesthetic. Our partnership dwayed." The image showed Sloan in her gown, posing with her bridesmaids. Champagne glasses raised, not a trace of Andre's parents. Not a trace of us. I sat down hard in the armchair, the photo trembling in my hands. They hadn't just excluded us. They were advertising it. Calvin came in from the porch, holding the morning mail. He set down a letter, its return address stamped with the seal of our bank. My breath hitched. It was a notice about unusual requests made on our home equity line, the same line we had tapped to pay for the wedding, apparently. A Mercer Media LLC had attempted to authorize withdrawals. The bank flagged it as suspicious since our names were still the only ones legally attached. I stared at the letter, the screenshot still in my lap. My heart thudded with a mix of dread and anger. They're trying to take more than just our dignity. I whispered, "They're trying to take our money." That evening, Aunt Jo stopped by, her hair pulled back and her apron still dusted with flour from a long day managing events at her venue. She carried a flash drive in her hand. "You need to see this," she said, plugging it into our old laptop. It was footage from Lakeside Manor's security cameras, the hallway outside the bridal suite. The timestamp showed Calvin and me standing outside, holding the silver gift box. Then Sloan stepping out, lips moving, face cold. Joe tapped the screen. "Notice anything?" We leaned closer. Before Sloan even opened the door, a man in a suit, one of the planners, maybe spoke into a walkie-talkie. "The Brookses are here. Do not let them pass the corridor." My stomach dropped. It hadn't been spontaneous. It had been planned. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the dark street. Every detail replayed in my mind the way Victoria had looked right through us, the way Andre had shrunk into silence, the way Sloane's voice hadn't cracked once when she told us to leave. I thought of the necklace still tucked in its silver box upstairs, a treasure passed down from women who survived harder times than this, women who fought for their place in families and communities that sometimes wanted to erase them. What would my grandmother have done? She had lived through segregation, worked double shifts in a textile mill, raised children who faced closed doors at every turn. She wouldn't have begged for a seat at someone else's table. She would have built her own. A noise startled me from my thoughts, the vibration of Calvin's phone on the nightstand. He picked it up, listened, then handed it to me. "It's Aaliyah," he said, his voice grim. Our family lawyer's tone was brisk. "Naya, Calvin, you need to come by my office tomorrow. I've uncovered something about those contracts, and you're not going to like it." My fingers tightened around the phone, a chill racing down my spine. Contracts, payments, Mercer Media. Every thread was weaving into something darker than a simple wedding dispute. What had Sloan and her family really planned, and just how far were they willing to go to erase us from our own son's life? Aaliyah's office was on the 12th floor of a downtown building, all glass and steel. With a view that stretched across the Atlanta skyline, Calvin and I sat in the leather chairs across from her desk, the hum of city traffic below reminding me of how small we suddenly felt. Aaliyah was family, not by blood, but by years of loyalty. She had been Andre's godmother, had eaten at our Thanksgiving table more times than I could count. But she was also one of the sharpest contract lawyers in Georgia, the kind of woman who noticed a missing comma the way others noticed lipstick smudges. She slid a stack of papers across her desk. I pulled the vendor files from Lakeside Manor. You two signed the originals, but 2 weeks before the wedding. Addendums were filed. Calvin leaned forward. Addendums revisions, she clarified. On paper, they transferred hosting authority from you to Mercer Media LLC. That company is registered under Victoria Mercer's name. My stomach lurched. But we never signed any revisions. Her eyes met mine. Steady. Exactly. These documents bear your signatures, but I know your handwriting. Nia. And this isn't yours. She flipped to a page where my name was scrawled. It looked eerily close, but not exact. The loops on the A were wrong. The ink looked newer than the rest of the contract. Forgery, I whispered. Aaliyah nodded. I'll need a handwriting analyst to confirm, but yes, if this goes to court, it's fraud. Calvin's fist hit the armrest, rattling the pens on her desk. They stole authority right out from under us. That's not all. Aaliyah continued. She pulled out another folder. I traced payments made to the venue and vendors. Some were routed through your account, but others came from unusual sources. A marketing agency in Los Angeles, a brand partnership firm in New York. Sloan wasn't just planning a wedding. She was staging a production. The word made my skin crawl. You mean, She signed deals with sponsors, luxury champagne, floral brands, even a boutique gown designer. They were promised exclusivity, images, social media content. The wedding wasn't just personal, it was a business deal. I felt my heart stutter. All those late nights stressing over bills, Calvin dipping into our savings, me working double shifts at the bakery to ease the burden, and Sloan had been monetizing the day behind our backs. Aaliyah's voice sharpened. She couldn't risk you two being present. You didn't fit the brand image, so they wrote you out. On the drive home, the city blurred past the windows. Calvin gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. She forged our signatures. He muttered. She stole our money and our dignity. I sat with the necklace box on my lap again, running my fingers along the ribbon. A family heirloom turned useless trinket in the face of corporate contracts. But my mind kept circling back to Andre, our son. Where was he in all this? Did he know? Did he help them? Or was he just a pawn in Sloan's game that evening? Bea came over with a casserole. Food solves nothing, but it keeps your strength up, she said, placing it on the counter. Then she lowered her voice. Nia, I need to show you something. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a series of screenshots. It was a private Facebook group one Sloan used to coordinate her influencer team. Posts dated just days before the wedding glowed on the screen. One read, "Remember the Brookses are not to be tagged or photographed. Their presence compromises the brand partnership aesthetic. Keep all shots curated. Mercer family. Andre. Bridal party. Sponsors. No exceptions." Another comment from one of her bridesmaids, "Lol can't believe she actually told them not to come." Savage Queen. The words blurred as I blinked hard. Savage Queen. As if cruelty were something to admire. Bea touched my hand. "I'm sorry, honey. But you need to see the kind of people you're dealing with." Calvin was quiet that night. Too quiet. He sat in his recliner, the bank's fraud letter spread across his lap, the screenshot still glowing on my phone. "Finally," he said, "we can't keep this inside. It's bigger than humiliation now. It's theft. It's fraud." "And Andre," I asked softly. Calvin's eyes darkened. If he knew and went along with it, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. The next morning, another envelope appeared on our porch, hand-delivered. No postage. Inside was a single photo. It was from the wedding, Andre and Sloan smiling under the floral arch we had paid for, in the corner, almost out of frame. was Victoria, her hand gripping a contract folder. On the back of the photo, scrawled in neat handwriting, were 4 words: "You don't belong here." I sat on the porch swing, the photo trembling in my hands. The morning sun was bright, but I felt cold, bone deep. This wasn't just exclusion. It was targeted, coordinated, a campaign to erase us, not just from the wedding, but from Andre's life. Calvin stepped outside, his phone pressed to his ear. "Aaliyah, it's time. We want every contract reviewed, every signature analyzed, every payment traced. We're done being quiet." I looked up at him, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve, the stillness before a storm. If they wanted us invisible, they'd underestimated us. But as I turned the photo over one more time, studying those 4 words, a chilling thought struck me. This wasn't Sloane's handwriting. It was Andre's. The photograph lay between us on the dining table, its edges curling slightly from where I had gripped it too tightly. The back still burned in my mind, those 4 words in Andre's handwriting: "You don't belong here." I wanted to deny it, to believe my son hadn't written it, but a mother knows her child's hand, even after 30 years. Those careful slanted letters were his. "Maybe it's fake," I whispered. Though my voice betrayed the doubt already eating at me, Calvin shook his head. The contract signatures were forged to look like us. But this, he tapped the handwriting. "This is him. For the first time in our marriage." I saw something in Calvin's eyes that shook me more than anger grief, raw and unguarded. We met Aaliyah the next day in her office again. She spread documents across the table, each marked with neon tabs. "The forgery is undeniable," she said, pointing to side-by-side comparisons of my real signature and the fake. A handwriting expert confirmed it. "These documents won't hold up in court, but here's the bigger problem. And look here. Andre's name surfaces in one revision. It may be nothing, or it may mean he was drawn into this without realizing. Whether he knew the extent of it or not, he's tied legally to the Mercers' maneuvering." My breath caught, so he agreed, or was pressured. Aaliyah allowed, but legally, he's on the hook. And if we take this to court, he'll be standing right next to them. The room tilted. My son, our only son, roped into this fraud, whether by choice or manipulation. The result was the same. Calvin's jaw tightened. "So they've got him trapped." "Exactly," Aaliyah said. "The Mercers are savvy. They don't just erase people, they bind them. Your boy might not even realize how deep he is until the walls close in." That night, Bea came over again. She was carrying a casserole dish, her second this week, but also a look I recognized from church gossip sessions. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," she began, lowering her voice as we sat in the kitchen, "but my cousin works at First Southern Bank. Guess who came in last month with Victoria Mercer Andre?" Calvin's head snapped up. "For what? Trying to secure a line of credit." Bea said they told the bank it was to cover business expansion for Mercer Media. But when the manager asked for financials, Victoria leaned on Andre, said, "Your parents will guarantee, won't they? They always do." My cousin said Andre just nodded. I pressed a hand to my chest. It all clicked: the sponsorship deals, the forged contracts, the branding. This wasn't about a wedding. It was about leverage. They were using Andre as the bridge to our resources, and when we resisted, they cut us out entirely. I tried calling him that evening 3 times, straight to voicemail. On the 4th attempt, he picked up, his voice weary. "Mom, please stop. You're making this harder." "Andre, baby, just tell me the truth. Did you sign those contracts?" Silence, then a long exhale. "It's complicated. Complicated." My voice cracked. "You let them take our names off the wedding we paid for. You let them forge our signatures. Do you understand what you've done?" "I was protecting you," he said quickly. "Sloane's family, Mom. You don't know them like I do. If I didn't play along, they would have ruined everything." Calvin took the phone from me, his voice low but sharp. "Son, they already did." The line went dead. The following Sunday at church, whispers trailed us through the pews, some sympathetic, others skeptical. One woman leaned over during fellowship and whispered, "They say you canceled the wedding mid-ceremony. Why would you do that to your own boy?" I forced a smile. But my hands trembled around the hymnal. The narrative was slipping away from us. Out there. We weren't victims. We were villains. After service, Pastor Reynolds pulled me aside. His brow furrowed with concern. "Nia, I don't mean to intrude, but is it true Sloane's family is spreading word that you tried to sabotage the marriage I bit down hard on my lip? The Mercers weren't just erasing us, they were rewriting us at home." Calvin spread the contracts across the dining table like evidence in a trial. "They think they've backed us into a corner," he said, his voice steady. "But corners can be powerful. From here, you see everything." We began piecing the puzzle together. Every contract, every forged signature, every social media post curated to exclude us, B's intel from the bank, Aaliyah's legal findings, even Aunt Joe's footage of the security guard blocking us. The pattern was clear. The Mercers weren't just manipulating image, they were consolidating control, and Andre was caught in their net. One evening, as I was folding laundry in the living room, the phone buzzed, a private number, against my better judgment. I answered. "Nia," a woman's voice purred. "Victoria Mercer, you've made this harder than it needed to be," she said smoothly. "If you'd simply stepped aside gracefully, none of this mess would have spilled into the community. Do you really want your son's career and his marriage destroyed by your stubbornness?" My blood ran cold. "You forged our names. You stole from us." "I refined what you couldn't manage," she replied. "We elevated Andre. He belongs in our world now. You don't." And then the line clicked dead. I sat in silence for a long time after, the laundry cooling in my lap. Her words weren't just arrogant, they were a declaration of war. When Calvin came in, I told him everything. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pace. He simply pulled out a notebook and wrote 4 words across the first page: "Build the case. Win." But even as resolve hardened in me, one thought gnawed at the edges of my mind. If Andre was truly trapped, how much had he known? And worse, how much had he already sacrificed to keep the Mercers' image intact? The week dragged like a storm front refusing to break. Every day brought fresh whispers, fresh humiliation. The bakery customers who once asked about Andre's achievements now leaned in with pitying eyes. "I just can't believe you ruined your own son's wedding." One morning, as I arranged cupcakes in the display case, Bea hurried in, her eyes wide. "Nia, you'd better sit down." She held out her phone. A video was spreading online footage from inside Lakeside Manor the night of the wedding. It showed servers wheeling away trays of untouched food, florists carrying half-assembled arrangements out the back door, guests murmuring in confusion as the string quartet packed up their instruments mid-song. The video cut to Sloane, tears streaking her flawless makeup, declaring to a circle of friends his parents canceled everything. Can you believe that they sabotaged their own son's big day? The comments were vicious. Selfish parents, jealous of their son's success. No wonder Andre married up. My hands shook as I watched. Sloane hadn't just lied, she had curated the narrative, made us villains in her branded tragedy, and the world believed her. That night, Andre showed up. He looked thinner, dark circles under his eyes. He avoided our gaze, shoving his hands into his pockets like a guilty boy. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," he said quietly. Calvin folded his arms. "Now you want to talk." Andre winced. "Please, just listen." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd once celebrated his first report card with ice cream sundaes, where we'd helped him fill out college applications. Now it felt like a courtroom. "I didn't know about the forged signatures," he said quickly. "I swear, when Victoria shoved papers at me, she told me it was just to confirm vendor details. I didn't read them closely. That's on me." "On you," I whispered. "Andre, your name gave them the power to erase us." His eyes filled, but he pressed on. "I thought I was protecting you. They said if you stayed involved, the sponsors would pull out. They said you didn't fit." Calvin's chair scraped back. fit into your own family, Dad Nomer's son. Answer me. Did you believe them? Andre's lips parted, but no words came. The silence was louder than any confession. A knock interrupted us. Aaliyah stepped in, her expression grave. I came as soon as I confirmed it. She spread new documents across the table. I subpoenaed preliminary bank records. The Mercers weren't just staging a sponsored wedding. They were funneling money, hundreds of thousands through those vendor accounts. On paper, it looks like wedding expenses. In reality, she slid one page toward us. It's debt repayment. Old, dangerous debt. Calvin frowned. What kind of debt? Aaliyah hesitated. James Mercer, Victoria's husband, lost heavily in a failed investment years ago. Private lenders, not banks. The kind of lenders who don't forgive. They've been circling ever since. My skin prickled cold, so the wedding was a front. Aaliyah finished. They needed cash flow. They needed your names on contracts. They used you, and when you started asking questions, they cut you out clean. Andre's head dropped into his hands. God, I didn't know. I thought it was just about branding. I stared at him, my heart torn between fury and pity. He was our son, still that boy who once cried when he lost his first Little League game. But now he was a man tangled in lies deeper than he could handle. Later that night, I stood alone in the backyard. The cicadas buzzed in the humid air, the garden faintly lit by the glow from the kitchen window. The necklace box was heavy in my hands again. I opened it, letting the pearls catch the moonlight. They belonged to women who had survived men walking away, families collapsing, communities turning against them, women who had endured storms with dignity. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry, not for Sloane, not even for Victoria, but for Andre, for the boy who had slipped so easily into someone else's shadow that he hadn't seen the darkness he was walking into. The next morning, Bea banged on our door. Nia Calvin, you need to see this. She thrust her phone at us, a leaked email chain, screenshots circulating in the same private influencer group. One message from Victoria: the Brookses will be erased from the narrative. By the time this is over, no one will even remember their involvement. Another from Sloane Andre's parents were useful for signatures and funds. Now they're liabilities. Keep them out of photos, out of posts, out of everything. And then, buried further down, a message under Andre's email, but the phrasing felt wrong, harsh in a way my son never was. Bea pointed to the header, drafted on Victoria's device. My stomach turned. Bea looked at me with wide eyes. Nia, is that really him? My breath faltered. It's his email, his words. Calvin slammed his fist against the doorframe. So he did know. But even as the fury rose, a part of me resisted. Andre wasn't cruel. He wasn't calculated. Those words, they didn't sound like my boy. They sounded like someone dictated them, someone with steel in her smile and ice in her veins. Victoria. That night, as Calvin sketched timelines and Aaliyah built her legal case, I stared at that email printout, my heart battling itself. If Andre had turned against us willingly, we had lost him. But if he hadn't, if Victoria had forced his hand, if he was still trapped, then we had a chance not just to fight back, but to save him. The truth had cracked open. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about money, manipulation, and old debts clawing their way into our family. But one question still burned in me, hotter than all the rest. If the Mercers were willing to forge, lie, and erase what else had they already taken from us without our knowledge? The night was thick with summer heat when Aaliyah called again. Her voice was brisk, but I caught the edge of something unusual hesitation. Naya. Calvin. I've gone deeper into the Mercers' financial records, she said, and I think you need to come here, in person, tonight, within the hour. Calvin and I were seated in her office once more. Aaliyah dimmed the lights and projected a spreadsheet onto the wall. Rows and rows of numbers glowed against the surface. Cold and merciless. This isn't just debt repayment, she began. It's something else. Mercer Media has been funneling money not only from your wedding contracts, but from multiple events over the past 5 years. Corporate galas, charity fundraisers, even influencer retreats, all of them show the same pattern-inflated invoices, rerouted payments, and she pointed at one column, a steady siphon into an offshore account. Calvin's eyes narrowed. How much? Close to $2 million? The number punched the air from my lungs. $2 million from events, how they stage lavish occasions, rope in wealthy sponsors, and then skim from every deal. The wedding wasn't an anomaly. It was business as usual. But here's the part you need to see. Aaliyah clicked, and a new document appeared, a scanned partnership agreement. At the top was a familiar name, Andre Brooks. My son. I felt the blood drain from my face. He's listed as junior partner in Mercer Media. Aaliyah said softly, "The paperwork is dated 6 months ago. My throat went dry. But he never told us." Calvin's voice was low, furious because he knew we'd never approve. The air in the room grew heavy. My memories scrambled, Andre arriving home late, the way he avoided questions, the time he brushed off my concerns about money with a tight smile. Had he been hiding this all along? Aaliyah leaned forward. "I don't think Andre understands the scale. His name is being used as collateral. Legally. He's tied to every fraudulent dollar. Hey, if the Mercers go down, he goes with them." The realization hit like thunder. Not only had they cut us out, but they had pulled Andre in as their shield. Our son wasn't just complicit, he was a pawn, a sacrificial lamb dressed in a tuxedo. When we returned home, Andre was waiting on our porch. He looked broken, shirt wrinkled, hair unkempt, eyes ringed with sleepless nights. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," he said, voice hoarse, inside, at the dining table. He laid it bare. "Yes, I signed with Mercer Media." He admitted, "I thought it was just business." Sloan said it was for tax reasons, that it would make partnerships smoother if my name was on documents. She promised it was temporary, that she needed me to trust her. "Trust her?" Calvin barked. "Son, she and her family are laundering money, millions, and your name is stamped all over it." Andre's hands trembled. "I didn't know. God, I didn't know." But then his gaze faltered, and something unspoken lingered in the air. I saw it, the thing he was holding back. "What else?" I asked quietly. Tears welled in his eyes. "Mom, the house." My stomach twisted. What about the house he broke then, sobbing into his hands? "I signed it. The deed. They told me it was just a formality, collateral for a short-term loan. I didn't read Calvin's fist slam the table. You signed our house over to them." Andre's face crumpled. "I thought it was reversible. I thought," his voice cracked, "I was trying to protect you." The room spun. Everything we had worked for, the sanctuary of 30 years, was now in the Mercers' hands. That night, I couldn't breathe. I walked the neighborhood streets under the streetlights, the quiet hum of cicadas mocking my racing thoughts. My son, my own flesh and blood, had been dragged into a labyrinth of lies and had handed our lives to the wolves without even realizing it. And yet, beneath the grief, something else began to burn. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft, fraud, manipulation on a scale that demanded consequences. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something sharp, steady, an unrelenting rise within me. Resolve. The next day, Calvin and I met with Aaliyah again. She had already anticipated our decision. "We can pursue criminal charges," she said, "forgery, fraud, racketeering. But it will get ugly. The Mercers will spin it. You'll be painted as vindictive parents out to ruin your son's wife." "Then we outspin them," Calvin said flatly. Aaliyah gave a thin smile. "Good. Because I've been waiting for you to say that." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photographs, financial statements, and an email chain that made my stomach knot. "This," she said, tapping one page, "is the smoking gun." Victoria herself directed payments to the offshore account. And here she tapped another is proof Andre's signature was added electronically after the documents were finalized. He may have signed some, yes, but others were manipulated. So he's not beyond saving, I whispered. Aaliyah's eyes softened. Not yet, but if you don't act fast, they'll bury him and you with their lies. That evening, Andre returned. He looked at me with hollow eyes. Mom, he said, voice breaking, I think they're planning something bigger. Another event, a charity gala in Savannah. But it's not charity, it's a cover. Calvin's jaw clenched. How do you know? Because Sloan left her laptop open. I saw the numbers. $500,000 is supposed to move through vendor contracts next month, and they're using my name again. The final puzzle piece locked into place. The wedding wasn't the end, it was just rehearsal. The Mercers weren't finished, they were scaling up. I held my son's face in my hands, searching his eyes for the boy I once knew. You want out, I whispered. He nodded, tears streaming. Please, help me get out. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about salvation. The Mercers had built their empire on image and illusion, on erasing anyone who didn't fit their brand. But they had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the resolve of a mother who had nothing left to lose. The morning after Andre's confession, I stood in my kitchen staring at the family photographs that lined the wall, smiling faces at graduations, birthdays, Thanksgiving dinners, images of a life we thought was secure. Now each frame felt like an artifact of a story rewritten without our consent. I brewed coffee slowly, each drip of the machine steady as a heartbeat, and I realized something. I was done reacting, done begging, done being erased. It was time to act. When Calvin joined me at the table, I spoke without hesitation. We're going to fight back, but not their way, not with anger or spectacle, with precision. His eyes met mine, and I saw it relief. He had been waiting for me to cross this threshold. What do you have in mind? Our first step was gathering allies. I called Aaliyah that afternoon. She answered on the second ring. I'm in. She said before I could even ask. I've already started compiling a dossier, financials, forged documents, witness accounts. If we time this right, we can strike where it hurts most, their reputation. We also needed someone who understood the media world, someone who could expose the Mercers on their own stage. That's when Calvin remembered Denise Carter, an old friend who had worked for years as an investigative journalist. When I explained the situation, Denise's laugh was short, sharp, disbelieving. Victoria Mercer. I've chased her shadow for a decade. Charity galas that never reported donations properly. Vendors who vanished after events. I could never get solid proof. If you've got it, I want in. I handed her Aaliyah's early files in a brown envelope. Denise's eyes gleamed. This could be the story that ends them. Meanwhile, I turned to Andre. He was still fragile, guilt weighing on every word, but I knew he had a role to play. Son, I told him, you need to go back in, play along, act like you're still loyal, but document everything. Every email, every contract, every whispered conversation. They trust you, that's our advantage. He hesitated. What if they find out I squeezed his hand? Then they'll know too late. Because by the time we're finished, the truth will already be out there. For weeks, each of us played a role. Calvin traced numbers. Aaliyah built the legal net. Denise gathered testimonies. And Andre brought back secrets only he could reach. But stronger, too. He brought contracts that reeked of manipulation. Voice memos of hushed meetings. Photographs of ledgers that showed money vanishing into thin air. Each piece was a thread. Alone, they meant little. Woven together, they were a noose. But revenge required not just proof, but timing. And timing, I learned, was everything. The Savannah Gala loomed a glittering event the Mercers touted as their grandest yet. $500,000 was supposed to flow through that night, a perfect cover for laundering disguised as philanthropy. And it would be their undoing. We spent hours strategizing around Calvin's workbench, the smell of motor oil mixing with the sharp scent of adrenaline. We'll let them set the stage. Aaliyah said, tapping the blueprints of the gala hall. Guests, donors, photographers, it'll all be in place. And then we pull the curtain. How Andre asked, his voice tentative. Denise leaned forward, a glint in her eye. We feed the story to the press that very night. I'll be in the room as a guest, documenting everything. When the vendors pull out mid-event, when the payments bounce, when guests realize the money isn't going where they thought it will all be captured live, and the contracts Calvin asked. That's where you come in, Aaliyah said. Turning to Andre, you'll present evidence at the right moment, proof that your name was forged, proof that they used you as a shield. You'll clear your name while exposing theirs. We practice scenarios like soldiers rehearsing for battle. What if the Mercers tried to spin the cancellations? We'd have screenshots of their emails, timestamps, vendor testimonies. What if they accused us of sabotage? We'd reveal the offshore accounts, undeniable proof of intent. What if Andre faltered? I would stand beside him, my voice steady, reminding the room that mothers do not abandon their children to wolves. The closer the gala approached, the sharper my focus became. Even mundane moments felt charged. Grocery shopping. I caught myself studying people's faces, wondering if they too carried secrets beneath polite smiles. Folding laundry. I rehearsed lines in my head, the words I would deliver when the truth finally shattered the Mercers' illusions. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered into the guest room. On the dresser sat the silver locket my grandmother had given me. Inside was a picture of me as a young bride, smiling, radiant, believing the world was simple. I opened it slowly, tracing the outline of that girl. You had no idea, I whispered, but I do now. The final week before the gala. The tension was electric. Andre reported that Sloane had grown distant, whispering often with her mother, her eyes darting whenever his phone buzzed. They're suspicious, he confessed one evening, pacing our living room. Good, I said calmly. Let them be. Suspicion makes people sloppy. The night before the event, Calvin and I sat on the porch. The cicadas hummed, the air thick with heat. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. You're ready for this, he asked. I nodded. I'd been ready since the moment they told us we didn't belong. His hand found mine, strong and steady. Then tomorrow, we take back everything. As dawn broke on the day of the gala, I felt no fear, only clarity. The Mercers thought they were orchestrating a flawless evening of wealth and spectacle. But what they didn't know was that every string they pulled, every light they lit, every champagne flute raised in toast would be the stage for their downfall. The ballroom at Savannah's Grand Marlowe Hotel glittered like a jewel box. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across polished floors. Violins hummed softly from the stage, and waiters glided between tables with trays of champagne. The Mercers had orchestrated every detail, the floral arch dripping in orchids, the step-and-repeat banner for photographs, the sea of donors dressed in black tie. It was a performance, every inch of it. But what they didn't know was that tonight, the stage belonged to us. I arrived on Calvin's arm, my silver dress catching the light like armor. Andre trailed behind us, his jaw set, his tuxedo sharp though his hands trembled slightly at his sides. Denise had already taken her place among the guests, a small camera tucked discreetly into her clutch. Aaliyah, calm and calculating, stood near the registration desk with a thin smile, her laptop open to the hotel's Wi-Fi. Across the room, I saw Victoria Mercer, regal in navy silk, laughing too loudly as she welcomed a senator's wife. Beside her, Sloane sparkled in a gown that probably cost more than our mortgage payments, her smile glossy and brittle. They looked untouchable, but beneath the surface, the trap was set. The first hour passed in a blur of small talk and staged photographs. Andre was summoned to the head table where his name card, embossed in gold, identified him as junior partner. I caught his eyes as he sat, and I gave him the smallest nod. He knew what he had to do. At precisely 8:15, Aaliyah texted us, "Vendors notified. Services will begin shutting down in 20 minutes." My pulse quickened. The first domino was tipping. It began subtly. The string quartet faltered mid-piece, then quietly packed their instruments and slipped out a side door. Guests whispered. confused, but champagne was poured to fill the silence. Moments later, the massive floral centerpieces, orchids, and roses were abruptly removed by staff. Contract error, someone muttered. Plates of hors d'oeuvres vanished before being served. The hum of confusion grew louder, rippling through the glittering crowd. Victoria's smile tightened. She flagged the event planner, demanding answers. Sloane's eyes darted nervously toward Andre, who sat stiff, refusing to meet her gaze. And then Denise stepped forward, her voice calm, but carrying across the mic the band had abandoned. "Ladies and gentlemen, before dinner is served, I think you deserve to know where your money has been going tonight." The room froze. Victoria stormed toward her. "Excuse me, who are you?" Denise smiled sweetly. Denise Carter, Atlanta Times. And I have in my possession evidence that Mercer Media has defrauded not only tonight's donors, but dozens of clients for years. $2 million, siphoned through offshore accounts. And the signature of their so-called junior partner she gestured toward Andre used without his knowledge on fraudulent documents. Gasps echoed like gunfire. Cameras clicked. Guests pulled out phones, filming. Victoria's face blanched, then flushed crimson. "This is outrageous," lies from bitter outsiders, but her voice was drowned out as Aaliyah strode to the stage, laptop in hand. "These are bank statements," she said evenly, her words amplified through the abandoned sound system. "Vendor testimonies, emails from Mrs. Mercer herself authorizing payments to shell accounts." She clicked, and the projector behind her flickered to life, displaying document after damning document. Andre rose, his voice shaking but firm. "And this," he held up a folder, "is proof that my signature was forged. I was their pawn, but I won't be silent anymore." The ballroom erupted. Donors shouted. Some stormed toward the exits. Others surrounded the Mercers, demanding explanations. Tyler's father tried to calm the crowd, but his voice cracked under the weight of disbelief and fury. Sloane's composure finally shattered. "Andre, please," she whispered, clutching his arm. "We can fix this." He pulled free. "You erased my parents from our wedding. You erased me from my own life. You don't get to fix this." Her mascara streaked down her cheeks as cameras recorded every word. Within minutes, chaos consumed the gala. The catering team wheeled away untouched platters. A cluster of guests cornered Victoria, thrusting phones in her face. Hotel security called the police. And through it all, Denise kept filming, narrating in calm, cutting sentences that would later air across every news outlet in the Southeast. Calvin and I stood near the back, hand in hand, watching the empire that had humiliated us collapse in real time. It wasn't rage I felt, it was release. By 9:00, uniformed officers entered the ballroom. They moved with practiced precision, escorting Victoria, her husband, and finally Sloane from the premises. Flashbulbs lit the night outside as the once untouchable family was led into waiting cars. Andre stood frozen, staring after them. I touched his shoulder gently. "It's over." He turned to me, his face wet with tears. "No, Mom, for me, it's just beginning. I have to rebuild everything." I pulled him close, whispering into his ear. "Then we rebuild together, outside." Reporters clamored for statements. Calvin shielded me from the cameras, but I paused at the top of the hotel steps. I wanted them to see my face not angry, not vengeful, but unbroken. "This isn't about revenge," I told the microphones. "It's about truth. We gave everything we had, and we were told we didn't belong. Tonight proves we always did." The crowd erupted with more questions, but I walked away, leaving the chaos behind, later, at home. The silence felt sacred. Andre sat across from us, his head bowed in exhaustion. The silver locket lay on the table, glinting in the dim light. "We did it," Calvin murmured. "No," I corrected softly. "We started it." Because I knew this wasn't the final chapter. The Mercers were powerful, cunning. They wouldn't disappear quietly, but tonight, the world had seen them stripped bare, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. The days after the Savannah Gala passed in a haze of headlines and hushed conversations. Every morning, the newspaper thudded onto our porch with another story. Mercer Media, under federal investigation. Donors demand refunds. Socialite dynasty in ruins. Neighbors who once whispered now lingered on the sidewalk, pretending to water lawns while stealing glances at us like we were the headline they'd been watching unfold. The same people who had questioned why we weren't at Andre and Sloane's wedding now leaned close, asking for details like we were characters in a drama unfolding on primetime television. But in our house, the mood wasn't victory, it was recovery. Andre moved back into his old room for a time, his presence heavy but welcome. He spent long hours on the phone with lawyers, clearing his name, establishing that his signature had been forged on most documents. It was exhausting, but necessary. One evening, I found him sitting on the porch steps, staring into the twilight. "Do you think people will ever see me as anything but their son-in-law?" he asked quietly. I sat beside him, laying my hand over his. "You don't need to prove yourself to anyone. Andre, the only thing that matters now is who you decide to be." He swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to be better than them." That was all I needed to hear. Calvin and I began piecing back our lives in small ways. We redecorated the dining room, painting over the walls that had once held photographs of Sloane and her family. We planted roses in the garden, their roots deepening into soil we had nearly lost. And every week, I sat in Dr. Yvette's office. A therapist, Aaliyah, had recommended unraveling the years I had spent shrinking myself for the sake of keeping peace. "You're not just someone's mother, someone's wife," Dr. Yvette reminded me gently. "You are a woman who just orchestrated a takedown of a dynasty without raising her voice. Do you see the power in that?" For the first time in decades, I did. But just as life began to steady, the twist came. It was a Thursday afternoon when a thick envelope arrived by courier. Calvin opened it at the kitchen table. Inside were court papers, notice of a lawsuit, defamation, intentional sabotage, loss of business reputation, filed not only by Victoria and her husband, but also by Sloane Brooks Mercer. My chest tightened. "She's suing us," Andre read the papers, his face pale. "She claims you ruined her marriage, her career, her future. That you spread lies to destroy her." The irony was almost unbearable. She had cut us from her wedding, erased us from her life, and now she was painting herself as the victim. Calvin's jaw tightened. Let them try. We have evidence. Still. As I stared at Sloane's signature at the bottom of the page, I felt something unexpected, not anger, not even fear, sadness. Because despite everything, she was still clinging to illusion, still choosing deception over truth. The trial date was set for spring. By then, the Mercer empire had crumbled completely, their accounts frozen, their house listed for sale, their name whispered with scorn, yet somehow they clung to the belief they could salvage dignity by dragging us through court. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed not in black, not in gray, but in a bold crimson suit, a statement, not broken, not silenced, present. The courtroom was filled with press, their cameras poised across the aisle. Sloane sat beside her parents, her once flawless face drawn and brittle. She avoided Andre's gaze, twisting her wedding band until her finger turned red. Our attorney, Aaliyah, rose first. She presented the evidence with surgical precision: forged contracts, financial records, vendor testimonies. Every page, every witness chipped away at their claims until the lies collapsed under their own weight. When it was Sloane's turn, she faltered, her voice shook, her tears felt rehearsed, and the jury saw through it. At the end of the week-long trial, the verdict came swift and clear, case dismissed. Plaintiffs found liable for damages. We didn't just win, we were vindicated that night, back home. Andre asked the question that hung in the air. What happens now? I looked at my son, at my husband, at the walls of the house we still owned. Now, I said softly, we live on our terms, not theirs. But life always leaves one final ripple. Weeks later, as I sorted through old boxes in the attic, I found something I had forgotten, a sealed envelope addressed to me in Sloane's handwriting. The date was 2 months before the wedding. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single page. Mia. I know you don't think I'm good enough for Andre. Maybe you're right. But I need you to understand my parents aren't who they pretend to be. If you ever get this, please watch out for him. He doesn't see what I see. He doesn't know what they're capable of. I sank onto the attic floor, the letter shaking in my hands. Sloane had known. Maybe she had been trapped, manipulated, coerced more than we ever realized. The woman who cut us from her wedding might also have been a daughter terrified of defying her own parents. The twist gnawed at me. Had we fought the wrong enemy all along? Was Sloane another victim, or just another liar that night? I placed the letter in my jewelry box beside the silver locket. 2 truths lay side by side: the betrayal that broke us, and the possibility that things were never as simple as they seemed. At dinner, Calvin noticed my quiet mood. "What is it?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "Nothing we need to solve tonight." But the question lingered, unspoken, heavy as thunder. As spring warmed into summer, I walked through my garden one evening, roses blooming around me, fireflies sparking in the dusk. For the first time in years, peace felt possible. And yet, as I stood in that soft light, I thought of the letter, of the woman who once carried our name and now sat somewhere in silence, erased like she once erased us. Forgiveness or revenge, what was the right choice? The story wasn't finished. Maybe it never would be. But for now, I had reclaimed my life, my family, my voice, and that, I realized, was victory enough.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.